everybody. My name is Amit, and today we're going to talk about React and CSS in a few minutes. But before we're going to get started with the lecture, I want to talk about how this talk actually started, how it all began. So a few months ago, I drove all the way to Beersheba. It was a long drive to listen to this guy, Nir, I think he's here somewhere, talk about React. Now, I'm not going to talk about his lecture. If you want to go to YouTube, it's on YouTube. You should go. It's a great talk. Just to get you the general idea, in his presentation, he built this accordion component. We all know the accordion component. You click on one item, it's open. You click on the other, the rest close, and so on and so on. So he built this React component, a dialog component with a select tab state, and this is the markup. You got the accordion, you've got the children, and normally you're gonna render one of the items with a class of open. So what about CSS? In his presentation, Nir didn't write the CSS. He used Bootstrap because nobody's perfect. But the CSS is generally pretty simple. You've got an accordion item class that has all the styles, all the default styles for the collapsed mode. And then you have an override style, like a class of open, that has the override for the open item. For example, height 0 on the collapsed mode and height auto on the open mode. So at one point of the presentation, we talked about the behavior of the component, and we said that if we have several items, like 2, 3, 4 items, then it's OK. The behavior is OK. But if we have only one item, then this item should be always open. And the question was, how do we know if we have one item or several items? And it's actually a good question because we get the items as children's, and it's an opaque data structure, so we don't know if it's an array or an object. We can't get the length. So we actually should use the child API, the child with capital C, and so on and so on. But at the point that Nir talked about that, I didn't care about any of that. Because before it all began, when Nir asked, how do we know if it's one component or how do we know if it's one item or more, I raised my hand because I knew the answer. And Nir pointed at me and said, OK, how do we know if it's one item or more? And I said, with CSS. And everybody laughed. Seriously, go check the video. Everybody started laughing. You remember. But I was dead serious because in a lot of cases, not all cases, but a lot of cases like this, you can actually save a lot of time, a lot of code. You can save a lot of ifs and conditioning in your code. And instead of all of this part, you can actually use just one line of CSS. One very simple, super performant, super readable line of CSS. Just go to your CSS mode. CSS file, and in the second class, in the open class, just add item only child, and then when the item is an only child, when there's only one item, it will always be open. That's it. Much more simpler. So back then, at Beersheba, at that talk, I decided that I want to come and talk to you and tell you that I think that CSS is, in some cases like this, is very underused. CSS in generally in pseudo classes like this one particularly. So today we are going to talk about React problems that you can solve with CSS. So OK, so now we can start. Let me first fully introduce myself. My name is Amit Sheen. I am a web developer. I've been writing code my entire life. I've done a lot of things over the years, but I was always focused on the front side of things. I am currently working as a front-side developer at Payoneer, which means that I write a lot of React in my day-to-day basis. And yet, most people still know me as that CSS guy, because I do specialize in CSS, specifically about animation and perspective, but we're not going to talk about any of that today. But as a React developer that specializes in CSS, I come across a lot of times I come across this misconception that React developers don't really like CSS, and that CSS developers are not good JavaScript developers. And I'm just here to say, no, you can absolutely be a good JavaScript developer, good React developer, and a good CSS developer. And if you know, I work with both, and I like working with both. And I realized that if you use them both together and let each one of them do what it's good at, there's actually a great synergy between React, between JavaScript, and CSS. So we are going to look at a couple of examples that today. We're going to look at some code. And the examples, the components that we're going to see today are pretty much based on components, on real-life components that I developed for my work. And the first component we're going to take a look at, it's this dialog box. Okay, it's a very simple dialog box. Obviously, I simplified everything for this talk. So we just have the content, the title, and the text, and we have a footer with 2 buttons. Now, I'm not going to talk about the content today, but I am going to talk about the footer. So if we're going to take a look at the code, I have a dialog component that has the props, and in the props we have the children. The children is the content. I rendered the children right here. And it has 2 more sets of props, approve props and cancel props. And you can see that right here, right underneath the children, I have a very simple footer element that inside I rendered those 2 buttons, but I only render them if I have the approve props. Then I render a button element, and simple native button elements with the approve props, and if I have the cancel prop, I render the button with the cancel prop. If we take a look at the markup, it's very simple. So this is the markup, this is the children, the title, and the paragraph, and this is the props. All the props are just the content and the theme. The content is the text, and the theme is the style. Obviously, in real life, I will also transfer an on-click action. So as we can see, this dialog, this footer of the dialog is obviously dynamic. So I can actually comment out just 1 button, and then I will get just the cancel button. If I comment out the second one, I'll get, if I comment out the second one, I'll get just the OK button. But the question is, what happens if I comment out both? So if I comment out both, according to what we're seeing here, the component, the footer component itself would still be rendered, and I don't want to render it because if we have no buttons, I don't want to render the footer component. So how do I do that? Any ideas? That's the correct answer. So obviously, if I would want to do it with JavaScript or I would have to start using conditions. I would have to start using conditions, okay? But as long as I have 2 buttons, it's not really a problem. I can check if either this or that is here, so I can render the component. But what happens if I have 3 buttons, or 6 buttons, or an unknown number of buttons? What happens if instead of a footer, it's a menu with an unknown number of links? So we can start doing it with JavaScript, but this is the point that we'll start working and starting complicating our code. Instead, just like Schechter said, we can go right here. This is the footer. This is the CSS, the dialog, the footer. I can come right here and say ampersand empty, and then just display none. And that's it. It's gone. And it doesn't matter what happens in the JavaScript. It doesn't matter if I render, if I originally have 2, 3, or 200 buttons. The second this component is empty, it's just off the DOM. And I know some of you, as a React developers, are saying, I'm not going to render a component to the DOM just to comment it out. it's not good practice. And you are right, but in some cases, it still makes more sense and it's still much more efficient than starting using a lot of ifs and conditions and complicating your code. And besides, it doesn't have to be a display none, and you can actually render it, but change the style. For example, I just want to get the border off. So I just do border none, and I don't have the border. I can keep the border and set the padding to none. So this actually looks not bad. And if I do render the buttons, if I do render the buttons, so obviously everything would be designed as usual. Let's look at another example. So this is a users list. Originally, it was just a bit different component, but here I made it a user list. So it's a very simple component. It's just a list component that has the users. Oops, I didn't mean to bring it here. That has the user data. The user data is just a JSON. Normally, you fetch the JSON from the server. Here it's hard-coded. And I'm just mapping the users from the props. I'm just mapping it from the array to the divs. So on, so long, so good. But in our design, our designer wanted to have, right now everything is centered. He wanted to have one a line to the left and the second line to the right, and then the alternate left, right, how to do it. So this mission actually, this task was given to a different developer, and what he did, what obviously a lot of people would do, was just use the index right here inside the map, and he checked that if the index module of 2 compares to 0, then it's left, otherwise it's right. It's a very simple, but we did added a class name to the user, and then according to this class name, we've changed everything to the left or right. But there's actually a better way. We can actually come here to the CSS. Here, this is the user class, the user container. We can actually use an nth child of odd. And oops, odd means every other element. So let's do a line self of left. So now the odd, meaning the first, the third, and so on. Oops, excuse me, it's supposed to be flex start. Sorry. Okay, yeah, got it, yeah. Yeah, flex start, and now every other one just move to the start. And I can do the exact same thing, but instead of odd, we can just do even, and then move it to the end. Oops. End. Okay? So we've seen that we can control things with pseudo classes, and I would say that this method is actually better than declaring a class in the JavaScript. Why? Because we want to think about responsiveness. We need to think that if we change the layout, we shouldn't change the HTML. We're going to get back to this. If we change the layout, we shouldn't change the markup. We're going to get back to that. But let's say that in this design, the left and right part, I want it to be only in desktop mode. If I'm moving to a thinner screen, I want it to be centered because I don't want to get this weird behavior. So all I need to do is just add media. For example, let's do a main width of 460 pixels. And all I need to do is just get both of them inside the media query. And then if I have a wide screen, yeah, but if I go to a thinner screen, it goes back to the middle. And then I did not change my layout. I did not change my markup between the different layout. So it's just an advantage. So let's go back to the presentation, sorry. And this is just a nice little tweet I ran across a few days ago by Bramos. Bramos is a great Belgian developer, and he wrote, "Repeat after me, a change in layout should not require a change in markup." And this is exactly what I'm trying to say, because if you build a good, strong, structural, semantic HTML, semantic markup, you don't need to change that markup if you want to change the layout, and then you can use all the layout, you can handle all the layouts with your CSS. A great example, a great place to see it is in Style Stage. Anybody know Style Stage, by the way? Except you guys, yeah. So anybody here remember CSS Zen Garden? Yeah, Zen Garden. So Style Stage is a modern take of the CSS Zen Garden. It's an experiment. For those of you who don't know it, you get, as a developer, you get an HTML file. You're not allowed to touch it. You're not allowed to add, change, move anything in it or add anything in it. You're not allowed to use JavaScript. You can only use CSS. And the amazing thing that there is different websites like this one, and this one, for example, it's actually the exact same HTML. And if we look at the layout itself, look at where the nav bar is. So here it's over here, and here it's on top, and here it's right here in the middle, and here it's also in the middle, and here it's in the right. So everything, all the sites that you've seen right now has the exact same HTML. The only thing that difference is the CSS. So you can control, and you should control a lot of the layouts using CSS. So, as I said earlier, the key for controlling the state of the elements is by knowing your pseudo classes. When I talk about pseudo classes, most of the people know the user action pseudo classes, the Hoover, active, focus, and so on. So let's say, for example, I have a button and I want to design a different style for the Hoover state. Okay? I obviously won't use any on mouse enter, on mouse leave. I won't use any of the JavaScript in order to manage the style because I have the Hoover style, the Hoover pseudo class. The same thing goes to the three structural pseudo classes, which is the empty, nth child, and the only child, and there's a lot more like those. This is the exact same principle. If I have an item that I want to design a different style for its empty state, I won't use JavaScript, I just use the empty pseudo class. And there's a lot of different kinds of pseudo classes, location pseudo classes, resource state, maybe we'll get to see some of them, input and more, but the most important pseudo class is, before and after. Seriously, I don't know why people don't use before and after more. This is actually giving a div a superpower. It turns every div you have, any box, 3 boxes. You can do whatever you want with them. So seriously, you should start using before and after, and I am going to show you some quick example. So let's go back to our demo. This is our user list. And as I said, I'm going to get the user list. Normally, I'm going to get the user list from the server. What happens if I get an empty list for some reason? Let's go here to the CSS. And instead of rendering the user, let's render an empty array, for example. So right now, I will see, nothing. I don't want nothing. I want to give a notice that no results. So normally, yeah, you're going to start and do an if the length is bigger than 0, so render this, and if this, render that. You don't have to. Again, just go to CSS. And right here in the list, let's close this one. We're going to do something that we've seen before. We're going to use the empty, because if the list is empty, but this time I'm going to give it and after. And the after pseudo class gets a nice little content, and let's say the content is no. So now, when I do have a content, I will see the content, and when I don't have any content, I will automatically see the no result. Obviously, of course, you can design it. Yeah, I know, forgot it. You can set any design you want to the pseudo element. That's yeah, okay. Just as an example, let's add one more thing. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, just to show that you can actually design anything, the pseudo elements, because it is a div for itself. You can design whatever you want with it. And by the way, the content, I know some of you are saying, wait, I don't want the content to be hard-coded. It doesn't, it's not a problem. I can come here to the CSS, to the JavaScript, to the JSX, and here in my list, I can also add a prop for the no result text. So let's call it no res text equals, let's say blah, blah, blah. So now, all I need to do is just, yeah, I need to set my props here. And then I can come here to the CSS, and instead of hard coding it, I can add an attribute. The attribute is actually the prop of the no res, and then I will see my attribute. So I can send the attribute into the CSS. And by the way, here in the dialog example, this is the way I injected the text into the buttons. You can see that the text comes into the content. And if we look at the CSS of the buttons, we can see that there is an attribute of content. By the way, as long as we're talking, I also, inside my props, I had the theme action. Now, in my original component, I obviously have a button component that mapped the theme into a class. But here I wanted to leave the theme and didn't want to change it. So what I do here in the CSS, I'm targeting the prop itself. You can target prop using CSS. Just put it in brackets and name the name of the prop, of the attributes, the same thing, attribute and the value. So, by the way, while we're here, one thing that we haven't seen in action, let's say, for example, I will render only one button here. I can here inside the buttons use the only child. This is the same variable that we've seen, the same pseudo class that we've seen in the first example. And if the pseudo class, if it's an only child, for example, let's change the width to 100%. And then if we have one button, then it's in full width. But where is my mouse? But if I'll render two buttons or more, then each of them would be in its designated width. Yeah, so, not this one, this one. Yeah, so this was the before and after, and seriously, if you do get one thing out of this talk, use before and after more, because it does really give you superpowers. Yeah, in conclusion, so first of all, the most important thing, if you want to use, first of all, use more CSS, and if you want to use the CSS properly, know your pseudo classes. There is a lot of pseudo classes. I don't know them all, but you should know that there is a lot of them, and you should know some of them, what are they doing. The other thing is build strong semantic and structured markup. If you build your markup correct, it would make your life easier because you can control everything. You can let the CSS control the layout, and then you don't have to change the markup while you're changing the layouts. Just one last thing. Oh, I don't have the slide for it. But if you are learning about pseudo classes, the best place is obviously MDN. It has all the pseudo classes arranged alphabetically, and this is the place to learn. Yeah, so that's it. That was me. Thank you. Oh, by the way, last thing, if you do have questions, about CSS or anything, the best place to find me is on Twitter. I do like to talk with people about front end, so contact me. That's it. Thank you.